Governor Polis has moved up the dates when the next group of Coloradans can get vaccinated, as President Biden says we could get back to normal by this summer. So CBS 4 medical editor Dr. Dave Hnida joins me. And Dr. Dave, how realistic is it to think we'll have some sort of normal by the 4th of July?
Actually, I think very realistic. You know, it seems like we've had a year where we've been afraid to be hopeful. But I think at this point in time, the prognosis is definitely filled with hope. And the reason for that is vaccinations. We are seeing people getting in America about 3 million vaccinations per day, which is great. But that number is going to accelerate very rapidly over the course of the next several weeks. And I think by the time we wind up hitting the month of April and go into May, we really are going to have an abundance of vaccines. So the availability is going to be very good, and that's really going to propel us forward toward more normalcy. Now, a couple of roadblocks, obviously, we need to think about. The first is variants, which we have been talking about for a long time. And variants are an issue, not so much in this country at this time. But if you take a look at what's going on over in Europe, Italy in particular, gosh, they're going backwards. They actually are having shutdowns and lockdowns right now because of COVID variants. So we need to still keep our guard up. And when you talk about keeping your guard up, that means the other wild card in this whole thing. What about mask mandates and other precautions that we are seeing actually evaporate right before our eyes, as if everything is just perfect in some parts of the country? And the last thing we need to do is just abruptly say, well, you know, life is normal, things are getting better, so since they're getting better, why don't we just stop any protective measures? So we need to continue with mask mandates and other public health measures. And then the third thing is really things like travel is a concern, particularly now before we really reach a good level of vaccination. Spring break has been really, it's very nerve-wracking to see videos of people just taking off and going everywhere and congregating. So I think that is, concern as well. I think the bottom line here is that I don't think there's going to be a day where all of a sudden this COVID alarm clock goes off in the whole country and you wake up and everything's fine. I think it's going to be a gradual improvement, a gradual reopening. It's probably going to be more regional, and I think Colorado sits very well. And Colorado does sit well because we have been following mandates. Our vaccines are really going well. So I think July is really a very realistic and a very hopeful date to be looking towards.
Yeah, it's certainly great to be able to feel that hopefulness. I know a lot of people are just feeling a little bit of relief with how things are going, which is great. So vaccination clinics were closed over the weekend because of just that record-breaking snow, and some Coloradans are concerned about if they'll get their second dose in time. Tell us about that and if it's okay to be delaying that dose.
Yeah, I tell you, the idea of not being able to get your second vaccine because of the snow, you're having nightmares as you see the flakes come down. The good news is we've learned that there's a window there. The vaccine that you get initially, it really doesn't wear off, and you don't lose the ability to really get a good booster with that second vaccination. You've got a couple of weeks of a window there, and the places that have postponed their vaccination clinics, they have plans to make it up. So you will be able to get your second vaccine, or even your initial vaccine if that was canceled, in a timely fashion to where you don't need to worry that you're going to lose out on full protection. You do have, once again, a couple of weeks minimum as a window here.
Great. That's great advice. I know a lot of people were concerned. So with more people getting vaccinated, are we finding out who's most likely to experience side effects?
Well, it's an interesting one. It seems as we vaccinate more and more people, women tend to be more prone than men, more likely than men, to have more bothersome side effects. Now, that is not necessarily a bad thing, but that just actually shows how women are different than men when it comes to an immune response to something like a vaccine. And really, what goes on is women are more likely to get things like sore arms, fever, chills, aches, and fatigue than men are when it comes to vaccination, particularly when it comes to that second dosage. And the reason for that, once again, is women tend to have stronger immune systems and immune responses than guys do. It all has to do, in many cases, we think, with hormones. Estrogen is something that really boosts immunity. Testosterone, on the other hand, tends to depress the immune system somewhat. And you see this in things like just looking at overall COVID type of issues, meaning men are more likely to have severe COVID if they would contract the disease as compared to women. And you could look at something even like other vaccines, flu shots, for example. Flu shots tend to be more effective in women as compared to men just because of that. So I think bottom line here is when it comes to the immune system, women definitely stronger than men.
Huh, yeah, that's very interesting. So we've heard a lot about long haulers, those who have symptoms for months. Could the answer to that be getting vaccinated?
What an interesting thought. And it looks like it may be a big factor here for people now. Long haulers are folks who have had COVID and then wind up to have ongoing symptoms, meaning you could have mild disease, you could have severe disease, you could have no symptoms of disease, and then all of a sudden you go on to develop ongoing headaches, ongoing fatigue, ongoing shortness of breath, ongoing muscle aches, you name it. It's the gamut of the symptoms, and it lasts and lasts and lasts. And a lot of times folks who are long haulers, they go see their doctors and their doctors go, well, we have no idea what's going on. Some people, I think, have been told, well, it's all in your head. And that's just simply not the case. We think what's going on is that in a lot of these cases, there are folks who do carry little viral particle remnants in their blood. There are also theories that have to do with a hyperimmune response. In other words, the immune system goes into hyperdrive. And so vaccination does something to the body and may wind up decreasing that hyperactive immune system or immune response that is responsible for these ongoing long hauler symptoms. Now, we have not done any formal studies on this, but as we vaccinate more and more people, we are hearing that perhaps up to half of people who have long hauler syndrome, so to speak, have had improvement in their symptoms after getting vaccinated. So there is something to it, and a really hopeful development, not just for people who are looking for protection from COVID, but also just a reduction in the long-term effects of COVID.
Oh, yeah, that's great. I know we've talked to some long haulers who just say they feel like there's no solution and it's kind of hopeless. So that's some great things to hear. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Dave. We'll talk to you again next Monday at 11 a.m. to get more coronavirus and vaccine questions answered.